everybody, and happy Friday, and thank you for coming to this workshop on the teaching elements of the job search. My name is Youssef, and I am the co-chair of the PFF, actually now Career Pathways, steering committee. So welcome, and thank you for coming. We have a good, strong panel that'll talk about something that I really have very little knowledge about, kind of the teaching part of the job search process. I'm very much kind of from a research perspective. So please feel free. We have a great moderator. If you have questions, feel free to ask. I will also be moderating the online session. So I will periodically, if I have questions from the online audience, I might interrupt and ask that question. I do want to, before we start, very briefly, make everybody aware we have flyers in the back, but we're hosting on Wednesday a networking basics workshop for graduate students. So this is a good opportunity. Your faculty mentors and advisors have probably said you need to network. If you were like me, it's like, well, how do I do that? Right? How do I network? So this will be a great opportunity for you to come out, learn a little bit about the ABCs of networking, develop your pitch, your introduction, and then also have the opportunity to rehearse and practice your pitch with an audience of faculty members who are not going to judge. It's going to be a very friendly practice environment. They'll give you feedback on your pitch, feedback on your introduction to help you network much more effectively. So we do have flyers in the back. Invite all of you to come out, take advantage of this great opportunity, and then the following day, on Thursday, March 29th, is also Graduate Research Achievement Day. Some of you might have posters there, or you might have colleagues come out and network with your colleagues as well. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Career Future Faculty Program, if you have already started the PFF certificate, if you already started attending events, for this event to count, you have to complete an online reflection worksheet, and then 5 of the events will count towards the career development requirements for the PFF certificate. For those of you who are just starting the Preparing Future Faculty certificate, we've actually had a change beginning fall where you now have to create an e-portfolio and document the completion and your participation in the events in this e-portfolio. If you go to the Career Pathways workshop, the requirements for the PFF certificate are detailed on the Career Pathways workshop. Some of you might also know that we have a brand new Preparing Future Professionals certificate that is tailored to graduate students who are interested in careers not necessarily in academia, but maybe careers in government, in the nonprofit sector, in the corporate sector. So the Preparing Future Professionals is a program that's very tailored to kind of the demands that you might see for that particular career path. We also have requirements for the Preparing Future Professional certificate that are detailed on the Career Pathways website. And again, those requirements for participation in this event, you will need to document that on your e-portfolio. I will stick around at the conclusion of today's event if you have questions about the 2 certificate programs that we have within the Career Pathways. So come up to me if you have questions. I'll be happy to answer them. But we have a great panel here today, so I'll kind of take my seat in the back so you guys can share in the wisdom of our panelists and our moderator. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Youssef. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session on teaching elements of job search. I'm the moderator for today, and my name is Pragati Rawat. I'm a 4th-year PhD student in the School of Public Service. I'm myself in the job market right now, looking for an academic career. And we have our eminent panelists here who are going to advise us on components of application packet and interviews related to an academic job search, particularly focused on teaching. So we're going to start with an introduction of the panelists. And in the introductions, I would request you to please add your experience in the job market or as a member of the search committee, particularly in a teaching-focused role. We can start with Dr.
Great, thank you. I'm Dr. MaryCatherine McDonald. I'm in the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies over in BAL. I've been here for 2 years at ODU, and then in terms of my experience on the job market, I went on 7 on-campus interviews, most of them at teaching-focused schools, and got 3 offers, so that's good.
You're here.
And I'm here, yeah. I haven't gotten fired yet.
So my name is Orlando Ayala from Engineering Technology Department in the College of Engineering, of course. In terms of my job search experience, I applied to about 40 universities. I got interviews in 5. 2 of them were teaching oriented. One is BNODU. Engineering technology doesn't have a graduate program, so we only teach 2 undergrads. So that was their main goal when they were trying to get somebody, and when we're trying to get somebody, because I have been in 2 committees searching for colleagues, for future colleagues. Anyway.
I'm Danny Russell, Associate Professor of Physical Therapy and Athletic Training. I've been here, it's my 7th year, but prior to being here, I was at a branch campus at Penn State. The first year there, I was still finishing up my PhD, and I was hired as an instructor, so I had a full teaching load that year, sort of 12 contact hours a week. And then after that, I was hired as an assistant professor. That was 9 contact hours a week of teaching, so still pretty heavy teaching. That was all undergraduate students, and then sort of research expectations too. And while I was there for a number of years, I was on search committees where we hired instructors and assistant professors.
Thank you. And so we'll begin our questions with the application packet first. So what components should one are required in the application packet for a teaching role? And what is your advice on the formatting, or what material should be included in that application packet?
Should we just go in a row? Is that the easiest?
Yeah.
All right.
So this is a great question. I think it's going to depend on the job, and hopefully they will tell you what they're looking for. So if they want sample syllabi and teaching evaluations, if you have them, that would be great. If you're teaching at the grad level and there's no official teaching evaluations, I would suggest that you try to get informal evaluations so that you can include those as well. So I think the more specific you can be about you and your teaching and what you do differently in your teaching. So you have your teaching letter, which is like your teaching philosophy, and then the sample syllabi. In my experience, different schools ask for different syllabi, so I'm not sure what it's like in different fields. And then evaluations and comments and things like that. So in the teaching philosophy, my advice would be as specific as possible, because I forgot to mention that I was just on a search committee here at ODU, so I've kind of also been on both sides. And you're kind of amazed when you're reading 200 applications. It looks as if someone copied and pasted it all from Google. And there's a lot of appreciation when someone has something innovative and they've targeted it to the school, even though that takes a lot of work if you're applying for 40 or 80 jobs. Even if you have one sentence about the school you're going to and that you have an idea of what they're doing and how you can fit into that, I think that's really helpful. And then the last thing I'll say that in terms of formatting would be to try to make it as smooth as possible for the person who's going to open that document on the other side. So include summaries, like a little table of contents. This is my teaching portfolio. These are the 3 things that are going to be in there. And then you can do summaries of your evaluations. I think that's helpful, so the person can sort of at a glance get a good idea of what's different about you and what, and also what's good about you.
So that summary has to be in the cover letter, you say?
No, so typically, I don't know how this is for other fields, but in my field, there's the cover letter, and then there's the you have to submit a teaching philosophy, which is like a 2-page document just talking about how you teach, what you think is important about teaching, and then you can include some examples of things you've done that are innovative or that have worked particularly well, or if you're applying for a school that has a very diverse student body, how you would teach to diverse groups of people, things like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cover all the points.
Sorry.
So definitely the teaching philosophy is coming. That one is for sure, 100% sure that's going. Now the others, it depends on the schools. I'm talking in the engineering side, all right? So teaching philosophy is coming. That goes. You had to prepare one pager or 2 pages. Some people ask for 1 page. Some other allow you up to 2 pages. The evaluations, before when I applied, I already had experience working in another university, but in Venezuela. I'm from Venezuela, so we don't have a system of evaluation. But what I did was what you explained before. I got some email from former students, and every time I got those emails telling me, hey, professor, the best professor ever, whatever they want to say about me, I copy-paste that in a document. One thing that I also did, and I always recommend, is I created an e-portfolio. That e-portfolio, I think the reason I'm here, one of the reasons I'm here is that e-portfolio that I created. You could Google it. You just type Orlando Ayala, Google Sites, you will find that e-portfolio. Of course, it's not updated. It's still like I'm still searching for a job. I should change that because it's an old e-portfolio. But you will see exactly how I created. There is a research section, teaching section. I created some syllabus, even though I was not asked. This university did not ask me for a syllabus, but there was another one that did, which I didn't get the interview, but they asked me for a sample syllabus. And of course, I created my own syllabus. I didn't try to see how their syllabus in their institution. One very important point that she mentioned is that try to tailor the letter, whatever you write, to that university. It takes a lot of work, but it makes a difference. It does make a difference.
Can I ask?
Sure.
Can we interrupt?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
How important are the teaching statements? Is it more, it's just a check mark, yep, they did it? Because I would suspect that there would be some similarities across the board, and I can't see someone reading 200 of them. Or do you guys actually say, hey, this one really is better than the rest? Is it more of a check mark, they did it because we asked it, or does it actually play into your screening process?
Having been on a search committee, I think it depends how many applicants there are as to how much you look. So if there are 200 applicants, there is no way I'm going to read everyone's teaching philosophy. If there's 20, I will have looked at them. It's one part of the puzzle that you're trying to sort of pick out. If it just looks like they've copied from Google, they've put in all the keywords, the buzzwords at the moment, and they've not told me how they are doing that in their classes, to me that looks very weak. But if they really tell me, I mean, as you said, specifically, how that they're implementing things, what are their classes like, I think it really matters, especially in a teaching position.
That's right.
For the teaching positions, now we're hearing that those maybe universities or entities are asking for the real videos, like, did you ever teach? Give me a 2-minute clip or something. So does this happen, or do you hear something like that?
In my case, my department teaches online.
So it's recorded.
Yeah, it is recorded. But when I was interviewed, I was not asked. They asked me, would you be comfortable teaching online?
Okay.
And of course, since I knew,
Yes.
and the answer was yes. But of course, the answer is a real yes. I'm comfortable doing that, but that's about it. I don't know other universities, to be honest.
I know that you guys are talking a lot about teaching, but I don't know if you have any experience in regards of research schools. So if you have to categorize teaching, publications, international collaborations, or grants that you're able to provide to the school in regards of research, or a research position, as a professor in research, which do you think is the most important one if you have to categorize them?
If it is research oriented,
Yes, so I have teaching, publications, international collaboration, grants.
to me, will be I don't know you guys, but it'll be publications. Grants, it depends, because maybe you didn't have the time to get some grants. But publication, you are supposed to have the time to publish something.
International collaboration. International collaborations, is that important?
I mean, to me, I'm looking at each application you do is to that specific university. So what are the things they're telling you they want? That's the first thing I'm looking for. What's the job description? I take a job description and I go through. What exactly are they looking? What's the requirements? What do they need? And then my letter tells them how I fit with each one of those things. And so I don't make it up. If it's not a good fit, then I'm not. But I'm matching onto it. So if they're telling me international collaborations is the most important thing, then that will probably be a first section of my letter. But most research universities, they want publications. A lot will also then want grants too, and that's got to be front and center for those things.
I think it also, there's nothing more frustrating. So in the search that we just had, it was either 220 or 250 applicants. And that's a lot to look through. There's nothing more frustrating than reading a letter that makes it clear that the person knows nothing about the school and did not target their letter to the job. And so just echoing on what they're saying, I think there's a way to kind of plug these cool things that you're doing, even if they're not related to the job, because it shows productivity and that you can work with diverse people and all sorts of things. But I just would be wary of focusing too much on things that aren't relevant to that particular job.
As you notice, the three of us I have been telling you, tailor the writing to the specific university. We know it takes time, but I remember reading one when I was in part of a committee, reading one letter with at the top addressed to our university, but in the middle was the other university. That's, of course, as soon as I read that, all right, done. Let me move on. And that was just on the first page. Done deal. It could have been the greatest person in the world. Done deal. I move on.
I was at Penn State University, and we had an applicant that said that he would love to work at an Ivy League school. So he didn't understand that there is a University of Pennsylvania is completely different than Penn State. So as soon as you saw that, gone.
Moving on, yeah. Especially when you had that many, that makes a difference. So going back to your point, you don't know whether it's going to be important. It might not be. You don't know. Better be prepared.
Has you guys been experienced that they use the software to look for matches, and you guys only get a certain amount of applications, or do you get them all? Do you guys get them screened out by recruiters or anything?
I think we get them all here. I don't know.
Yeah. Same thing. We just, yeah.
So the first round of these applications, you're just looking to weed people out for any reason.
If you make it easy, yes.
Yeah.
If you make it easy, basically, could happen.
If you make small mistakes, whatever, you're not going to get past that first page. You're throwing it.
It's a numbers thing. So if there are 200 applicants, you do not have time to read through all of those. So if you can quickly get rid of them and trim it down, great. When there's 10 applicants, I've been on committees where we've got 10 applicants or so, you can go through, the whole application packet, and you'll be more, I've seen a CV that was actually badly formatted, and that person got the job because there was only 10 applicants to look through, and you sort of said, well, maybe that was the way it was taken by our university, and it got messed up when they put it into a PDF. So it might not have even been the candidate's fault. But because it was a small pool, you were able to do that and not worry about those things. I'm certainly not looking for grammatical errors in the letter and going, they've got a comma in the wrong place. All right. It's got to be something bigger than that to me, immediately you say no to that individual.
Can I add to that? Sorry. I told Todd I wasn't going to talk. But very briefly, I think part of the broader issue for search committees is kind of the massive numbers of applications. But it also, we're looking for things in the packet that indicate that our position wasn't the priority, that it didn't get the due diligence. So if we very specifically said we want a teaching statement that explains X, Y, and Z, and it doesn't, it's like, well, did they really? The question that comes to mind isn't, I'm trying to read this out as much as, did they really read their ad? Our ad. Do they really want to be here? And so that's how we try and think about winnowing through the list. And sometimes it's, they didn't care enough to proofread the letter to say, oh, I want to apply at Kansas State when we're ODU. So then it's indicative of, well, they really don't want this job. So let me put that aside.
Yeah.
So there is some mental heuristics that go on there to kind of help weed it out a little bit.
Yeah, you gotta do your homework. Even if you get the phone interview, understand what college is that, understand what department is that, where it's located, what kind of connection they have, do they have labs around it. Understand that, because some of the questions could be addressing those topics. So you gotta do your homework. You got to do your homework.
A related question that I have for the application packet: what courses do you say that you can teach? Because when you're applying for an assistant professor's role, you probably do not have much experience of teaching but you're pitching yourself based on the courses that you have taken rather than what you have taught. And many of the job ads ask for certain, you should be able to teach this school.
Yeah.
So what is your pitch other than, you might not have even done a research publication on that particular subject? How do you pitch yourself based on what courses they are asking you?
So I had some experience with this because I had, there were some positions that were very close to my area of specialty that I had not taught in. And so what I would do in that situation is say, look, this is my AOS, so I am equipped to teach it, and this is where I would do a sample syllabus, even if they hadn't asked for one. This is what I would structure the course, because then that shows that you know which books to read and that you've thought about it, even if you haven't had the chance to do it. I think it gives the committee the impression, at least, that you're capable.
Yeah, I haven't had that experience. I mean, I had the experience teaching in Venezuela that helped me a lot when I was applying here. If I had that position, that circumstance, I don't know, I would have tried to teach. See, before coming here, I had a PhD. I was in a postdoc position. I would have tried to teach something. Talk to my boss and say, hey, can I teach 1 or 2 classes in your? I would have done something like that. I'm not saying you have to do it. I really don't know. I'm just thinking at this moment, out of your question, what would I have done if I were in that position? I didn't do it because I already had the experience, but that's what I would do.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people coming out from a PhD, you won't have had experience probably teaching the specific courses they're asking. But in the letter, this is your opportunity to say why you are a good teacher. So if you've had good feedback or you've had a student opinion surveys and you've got those numbers and things, put that in. Tell them why you're a good teacher. And then you can sort of say, here's things with my background that I'm comfortable teaching. And I'd match onto those courses. If they're asking you, if they're saying, we want you to teach these courses, then you want to be putting in, I'm comfortable doing this. I also think you don't want to stretch too much, because getting that job where you are teaching all these courses that you really aren't prepared for, and is not your background for your PhD, I don't think you're going to enjoy that job. It's going to be a lot of hard work, and then you're really not going to, I think you're going to get sort of stuck there. So I don't think you want to stretch too much. It should be in your wheelhouse, but I agree. If you've done graduate work in that area, you should be able to teach, especially at undergraduate level.
Along with that, if you say something, make sure you can back it up. So if you don't have time in the letter of the teaching philosophy, and you kind of jot down like, oh, I can teach this, make sure that if you do get a phone interview and they ask you, that you have an idea, even if you don't have a worked out syllabus, of what sort of books you might use and how you might structure the course, so that you're not blindsided by that question.
Any other questions related to application packet for teaching related academic jobs?
Just a question though. Have you guys, you already said that you did a postdoc, but in general, have you guys done postdocs, and if so, how many?
Only one.
Only one.
Enough.
Well, I mean, I think that's actually part of what you're making a decision as a PhD student. So I took an instructor position and then moved into an assistant professor position. It was available to me without the postdoc, and it worked for me. But I will say that was much harder to get research going and keep that sort of going while you're in a fairly heavy teaching load. So the benefit of a postdoc is you get things published from your PhD, you get more connections in the field, you develop your skills, you run more publications. And at my spot, I would say people who had done postdocs, and there were physicists who had done 2, and there were chemists, biologists who'd done 1. Those people came to Penn State, Berks campus, and hit the ground running in assistant professor positions. And every single one of them got tenure, maybe even early. People that hadn't got a postdoc, I think it was just, people made it, some didn't, but it was harder, I think, without that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You mentioned you were an instructor. What is your view of individuals? Because instructors and adjuncts right now seem to be a very popular trend. if you try to go to that route to get in the door, are you viewed negatively by those who are not? Are they going to see that, are they like the children of the teaching faculty, or is it a positive thing to do to get into a university?
I think it can depend on the job. If you're looking for a teaching focused job, the major benefit, there are less postdocs in humanities. I didn't do a postdoc, but I did a 2-year visiting assistant professor job. And I think the thing that may have helped in that situation was that you have an enormous amount of teaching experience above and beyond people who are just getting out of a PhD or who are doing postdocs that don't have any teaching involved. In the humanities, I don't think there's any looking down on somebody who's done that before. I think it's so ubiquitous at this point that would.
In engineering, I don't see it as a weakness. It just happens to be that you have to take that job. But like he was mentioning before, it's hard to do research. That the part, if you have to take that job because you're thinking on going after another type of job, assistant professor job, then try to keep your research alive. That's important. You have to keep your research alive. Whether you were an instructor when you were applying to the assistant professor position, that's fine. I don't see that bad in engineering. But definitely keep your research alive. Somehow keep it alive.
And I think there are ways to do that because you can integrate your research sometimes with your teaching and make a commitment to yourself to get one article out every semester. Even if it doesn't get accepted, you're still working on things, and when it comes up, when you're in an interview, you can say these 3 things are under review, or whatever.
Okay. Moving on to the next section, it's about interviews. The first interview, phone or Skype or FaceTime. So, what questions to expect in the first interview, or what questions have been posed to you during the first interview?
I'm glad just because when I read the question, I said, I don't remember well. I don't remember what were the questions teaching related.
Yeah, the only one thing I can think of is describe a problem that you've had in your teaching and how have you overcome it.
Yeah.
I got that question. I remember.
Well, that's the only one that I could remember.
It's increasingly becoming more common, at least in the humanities, to give the interviewee the questions ahead of time. And so in I think about 50% of the situations that I had the questions ahead of time, which yeah.
Wow.
And the reasoning was that they want you to be able to be your best, and so yeah.
Wow.
That's great.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that question, how would you teach such and such? Then there's going to be questions related to the teaching on that campus, which is where when you get you have to do some interview when you apply, but when you get that phone interview, you have to be a stalker and figure out exactly who's going to be on the phone call. Mm-hmm. And what their specialty is, and what they teach, and what the student body looks like, and how diverse it is, and what the acceptance rate is of the college, because all of that gives you data. They're going to ask you about how you would teach certain things. So here they ask, how do you teach to a diverse community, because the student body is very diverse. And I think having 2 or 3 concrete examples of things like that are really show that you've really thought about that particular job.
Your homework.
Yeah.
Do your homework. I already knew the people I was going to be talking to. I mean, already knew through internet, right? Reading the website and what they do, what's the type of research that they do, what kind of classes they teach, what courses they teach, and all that. I already knew that before the interview, and I was reviewing that. I knew the 11:30 call, right? So at 11 I was reading, going over those pages because I didn't want to miss anything.
I had everything taped to the wall behind the computer.
Really?
Don't tell anyone. Yeah, like hundreds of note cards.
Yeah.
And so you could just be like, look, and you can't read, right? Or you can glance up, okay, this is what I want to say.
Yeah.
I don't want to forget this.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Because during the interview, I've observed that you kind of, when you end the interview, you're like, you've missed the finer points that you wanted to leave with the committee. And I think if the questions are given in advance, that's a great thing, because then at least you have the time to, you have the opportunity to tell them what you have done at least. Otherwise, you come out and you think that you haven't even told them what experience you've had that are valid for that particular position.
I had one where I felt like I missed something that I knew that they really wanted to know, and I think if you do it in the right way, it's okay to email them afterwards and say, you know, as quickly afterwards, not like 6 days later, but you know, oh, I'm so, you know, bummed that I forgot to say this. That was, you know, a perfect answer to this question, or I forgot to tell you about this experience that I had. I just wanted to make sure that you knew.
I've been wondering about that, but then I never sent an email. Whether it's okay to send an email, it seems.
I think as long as you're normal about it, right? And you're not sending like, oh, and then I forgot this, and then I forgot this, and then, right? Like, if there's one thing and you say it coherently and you sound like a rational human being, then I think it's okay. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions related to first interviews, and then we'll move on to the campus interviews.
No, we've been talking. Oh yeah,
there's a campus. I'll just wait for the campus interview.
No, I was wondering, we're talking about the phone interview? Or
we were talking about the first interview. I
Mm-hmm.
also would like to know, like, whether it's okay, like, is it normal to send thank you emails after the phone interview as well?
Yeah.
Always, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
One question regarding teaching positions, is it okay to kind of point out your research capability also, or is it something negative? Because I discussed this with, let's say, 2 of my professors. One mentioned that if it's a teaching position, if you kind of both out or focus more on your publication and research, they're going to think of you as a candidate that just want to get this job for visa issue or something, and then move to a assistant position professor because he's a research oriented person. Or on the other side, I don't know if it's something negative or positive in general.
Yeah, I would say having been on search committees, you are looking for somebody who's going to come there and spend some years at that place. So things in that letter that it suggests that this is not the job that they're really looking for. Just even if they're a really strong candidate, it scares you because you don't want to be on that search committee again next year, and the year after, and the year after, right? You want to get this done, hire somebody for 5 or 6 years, sort of at least, rather than doing it again. So I think you can speak to your research, but if I'm reading that's where you can put that in your letter. But that letter's got to come across that you really want to teach. That's your focus, and you can emphasize. You can sort of talk about your research, but I think especially you want to build that into how you want to include undergraduate students doing research with you. Because lots of universities are really looking to include undergraduates doing research because it's a fantastic experience for them. So if you can really make your research being about including students, I think that can really help you for a lot of those sort of positions.
It's also sometimes, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Sometimes it's tough to actually figure out how much they want you to research and how much they want you to teach because for the most part, places want you to do it all, right? So it's one thing that I found super helpful was to go through the faculty and look at what they have done for research since they've been at that university, if you can figure that out. Sometimes you can't figure it out. And that gives you a good idea of like what kind of research is going to be required for tenure and what pace people typically work at, which will give you an idea of how much you should talk about it.
That was exactly what I was gonna say. No, good. I mean, just go to their webpage and start looking at their faculty to see if it is teaching oriented, but yet they start publishing. Then it means that they're welcome their research. But if you see that none of them publish, then you might just say, make the connection with undergrad, make the connection with your classes, because you could say, this is the type of research that I do that helps me to teach anyway.
Right.
So you could make the connection with the teaching that way.
I just want to respond to this particular issue because on the other side, so as a faculty member who's serving as a reference for students who are on the market, I've actually had situations where my strong research graduate students, the people who are interviewing them will call and say, do you really think this person will be content at a teaching institution? And so then as a faculty member who's who's had the conversation. So I think the key part is you also want to make sure you have a conversation with the faculty members that are going to be your references, because then I was better prepared to say, she does have or he has a very strong research competency, but you're also looking for somebody to teach research methods. Or you're looking, you'll also get a faculty member who would be a good mentor to work with students inside and outside of the classroom. But you also want to make sure that that message about being able to teach or being a good teacher is reinforced by your faculty mentors and the people who are writing your support letters or answering the phone when they check references, right? So you do want to make sure you have those conversations with your committee or with your faculty advisor or whomever it is that you're listing as a reference, because they need to also be able to back up the story that you're putting out there.
You had a question?
Yeah, just to be on to what you were saying, Dr. McDonald, is it okay to ask, I don't know if in the phone interview or in the campus interview, to ask them what is the percentage of time they will expect you teaching, percentage of time they will expect you, researching and so on and so forth? Is that like a fair question to ask?
Oh, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if it is fair. I ask that question every single time. It is, yes. You need to know what you're going to be expected.
Okay.
Because and there are ways to ask it that are not, that are more gentle. Not that the way that you just asked it isn't gentle, but if you're getting the feeling like they're squirrely about something, then I think you can ask it in a more general sense. So how, about how often do people publish? And you can ask, especially when you're on campus, ask questions about the tenure process.
Yes.
You do not want to end up in a job
That you don't know the process.
right. And the search committee doesn't want you to end up in the job either, where tenure is going to be. Speaking as someone who does not have it,
Well, I don't have it either. So.
you don't want to be in a position where you feel like it's completely out of reach.
Yeah, that's a good question to ask.
And I will say that, so I was, as an assistant professor at Penn State Berks, I was 9 contact hours of teaching a week. But we were expected to get a solid publication every year as well. They had instructors at that university with 12 contact hours a week that didn't have any research expectations, scholarship expectations. But I've also seen other colleagues who are at places that are on the tenure track, assistant professor, and it's a 12 contact hours a week. But there are some research expectations, some scholarship. It's going to be lower, but there are expectations. And even a lot of those universities now are still, they want you to come in and do a good job teaching, but they're still trying to get you to do research too and bolster that.
Yeah, I have a question from the online group. And so the question is it a big disadvantage that I have experience of teaching as an instructor only one class before hitting the job market? So is it a disadvantage having only taught one class before going on the job market for a teaching-focused position?
I don't think it's necessarily a disadvantage. I mean, I don't know if that person means they've had sole responsibility for only one class, but they've been a teaching fellow for other classes, maybe?
It's actually kind of my situation, I believe. I'm the primary instructor as adjunct faculty now for one course, but all my previous teaching, actual experience was kind of like a teaching assistant. It could be either lab preparation, grader, or organizing a class or being responsible, as a coordinator for a class, something like this. But the actual only one course as a primary instructor that I'm responsible for everything. So is it something good or bad or a very
so that you have to look at the pool. Like I think you're going to be up against people who haven't taught at all, and you're going to be up against people who've been teaching for 5 years full time. So it's just we wouldn't throw anyone away for that, right? It's just. And all of that is your teaching experience, right? The classes you've prepared, when you've been a teaching assistant, when you've researched, guest lectures, all of that can be included for sure.
Yeah, I don't see it as a weakness. I don't see it. I wouldn't throw out a application because of that. Rather, I would take it.
Yeah.
My background is in human resources, and so I have a number of years' experience doing training in the work environment. So. Learning objectives, various similarities, but is it seen as a benefit or is it seen like, no, we're completely different?
That's my experience. My background is human resources as well, and I did a lot of training as well. And I included that in there because it is teaching in a way.
It is teaching.
And it also shows that you have a breadth of experience, and also that I did human resources in a university setting, so I think it's helpful to know that the candidate can communicate to both faculty and administrators.
Yeah.
I don't know if, please let me know if questions are too many so I can stop. But since I'm actually in the market and I'm facing a couple of interviews, I'm kind of concerned for the way that you're going to definitely help me a lot. So one main question that they usually ask in interviews is that tell me about how you're going to bring inclusion and diversity here. This is one of the main questions. I think nowadays is getting very important. Some bank in university or many other, the job industry, they're bringing us, another, extra department as an inclusion. So what is the best way to answer this, for example, for a lecturer or, let's say, assistant professor position?
I don't know. That's a tough question. I've not really had to answer that one. It's on a job search. I think you relate to things that you have done, that examples. Even if is it students you've worked with? Are there undergrads? Have you involved them in your research? Or so just try and make connections with what you've done that has been inclusive.
I think the most important thing is that you're specific, right? So that you don't just say these keywords and say like, oh yes, diversity is important, right? But like, how does that benefit your classroom? And give a specific example, even if you haven't experienced it yet, but you think that this is the case. So, for example, the place where I had my visiting assistant professor was extremely homogenous. Like, all of the students were exactly the same. So I didn't have a lot of experience teaching diverse students, but I had this idea that teaching diverse students would be better for the classroom because you have a variety of different viewpoints, which increases the vibrancy of the discussion. So you can talk about stuff that you haven't yet experienced, but that you look forward to, I think, as well.
What would be an example for this, like hypothetical? How do you include, let's say, a diverse population? How do you go to inclusion? The perfect example, maybe unreal, but just hypothetical example.
What I would do, addressing your question, I'll come back to this, and maybe it's related anyway.
Yeah, it's related.
I will think about outreach activity and say, hey, I will go to high school and talk to kids and so on and so forth, because at the end of the day, you're not controlling the people who are registering your classes. You don't know who's coming. You don't have to say, I want these people from Venezuela in my class. It's impossible to say that. But what I would do is to suggest some outreach activities, and your advisor have done that a lot, so you have some ideas.
This is not necessarily, I think, an answer to a question, but more as a resource. So not last summer, but the summer before, PFF hosted a workshop as part of the CLT Summer Institute on Diversity and Inclusion, a workshop for graduate students. And that workshop is recorded. It's available on our Cultura site, so that might give you some insights. Unfortunately, I run so many workshops that I can't tell you the specifics of what was talked about in that workshop, but I remember we had one specifically on diversity and inclusion, because that was the whole theme of the Summer Institute for that year. So I also know that recordings from the Summer Institute with the keynote speaker and all of that is very focused on teaching. So there might be some things there that could be beneficial if you're thinking about that. I will give you one example. I have another student, not Pragati, but another student who's also in the job market this year. And in the packet, they specifically asked for how she would encourage diversity and inclusion in the classroom and how that was reflected in her approach to teaching. That was an explicit request in the ad. So I think some places are becoming much more explicit about wanting that requirement.
And I have written those kind of essays as well. And in my essays, and tell me if I have been hitting the right mark there, but I have been talking about how I, in my teaching, how I encourage students to think on in a multiple perspectives, like different perspectives. That's what I encourage them to think about, and then setting the right tone in the class so that every student feels empowered to speak and is encouraged to bring forth their point of view. And the normal discipline setting, basically, and then interdisciplinary knowledge, building through your examples about various, your examples should depict that kind of a multi-stakeholder perspective, interdisciplinary knowledge, and also a sensitivity to community based on like volunteering job. Like we have a volunteering assignment in the Public Service Foundation's course, so that is also kind of sensitizing your students to local perspectives. So these are the various things I kind of put in my essay on cultural, ethnic diversity and inclusion, and based on our own, like we can always mention that as an international student, and I guess you are also an international student, so that's another thing that I kind of mention in my, because then we can bring on our international perspectives to the classrooms.
That's a good suggestion.
Those are the kind of things I kind of put on.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think you can also talk about best classroom practices, and you can look this up, right? If you haven't had that experience in the classroom yet, about who you're going to call on if you're I'm in a very white male-dominated field, so I pay a lot of attention to the way that the syllabus is structured, making sure to be inclusive of voices that are typically unheard, but are there, right? And then, who are you going to call on in the classroom? How are you going to recruit students who might not feel like they are represented in that field, and so they might feel like a stretch to them, things like that.
Another question that I have regarding interviews is, how do you handle the question on what are your weaknesses as a teacher, and how do you cope with those?
Well, you gotta be open. You gotta be sincere, and if you think you have a weakness, say it, but also say how you're gonna address the weakness. I never got that question, but no, I didn't. Thank God I didn't get it. But if I had that question, I would have said. I don't know. I have weaknesses for sure. I mean, but yes, be open about that. Don't hide things and so on, and be sincere, but give an answer on how you're going to address that weakness.
We want to know a weakness that you mentioned in the interview and still got the job.
I was asked that everywhere I went.
Oh, yeah, really?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you kind of have to do that thing where you're balancing between, you don't want to say like I hate teaching, I'm bad at it, right? But there are always things that you're noticing in the class. Hopefully, there are always things that you're noticing in the classroom that are not going as well as you would like them to. And so I think I'm trying to think of how it's always different what I'm bad at the moment. So I'm trying to think of what I said, but. I think you can say something like, I really struggle with making sure that everyone participates. And so here are a couple of things I'm thinking about doing in the future, and I'd love to learn from you, right? So that, especially if it's a teaching-based school, these are people who have thought about pedagogy. And so they...
That's a good way to handle that question.
Thank you.
Definitely. That's why you got the job.
Yeah, I think definitely if you can pick a weakness. So an example would be, grading, I find it really tough to do all this grading, and I've heard that people, are using rubrics, and I don't know how to write a rubric, but maybe I've been looking at some websites, I've started to use them, and certainly that would be an area if I came here, I'd be looking to develop my skills writing rubrics or something like that. So if you can turn that sort of weakness into something that you've identified and you're trying to improve, I think that's a good way of sort of turning it around.
And you can do that. You can say, I didn't like to use technology in the classroom, and I felt like that was a weakness, and so I'm working on it this semester, and it's going really well, which shows that you're, that's the kind of thing.
Yeah, and getting people to come in and evaluate your teaching and give you feedback on it. I remember that one of the first evaluations I got said that, you say okay all the time. Gosh, right. So you then try and work to avoid doing that. So I think it is just taking some sort of weakness and saying how you are trying to improve. Because ultimately, that's what we're all trying to do, is get better. And the best teachers I know are people who've been doing it for 30 years, and they are still working at getting better and trying new things. Mm-hmm. So the people that kind of think they've got it after a few years and don't change are the ones that go stale and are not really good teachers.
You could turn that weakness question into how you're going to improve your class. That's definitely a good suggestion. Definitely.
You got a question?
Yes, I have a question. Usually, one question that they answer is where you're going to see yourself in the next 5 years. As a lecturer position, what is going to be the change in the next 5 years? So, what is the best answer to say you respond then? Is it something that, for example, I personally was thinking that developing the courses that I really love to teach, so based on clean energy, which is my major, environmental issue, is it something to mention? Is it something else that I should answer? I got rejected for that job, so that's why I'm trying to figure out what is the best. So what was the kind of the bottom?
No, but you know what? One thing, let me tell you, you didn't get rejected. Somebody else got selected. Okay. It's different. It's different. You did not get rejected. You did not get rejected. Somebody else got the position, because that doesn't mean that you were a bad candidate. That means that somebody else got it. That's all. You did not get rejected, I think.
So in a 5-year timeline, back to what I said before, you want to still be at the same place. The committee want to be seeing that you are still there in 5 years.
Definitely.
So you're definitely not wanting to talk about something that they're like, oh, you're not going to be here because we don't offer that. But I think offering teaching a course that you're interested in, developing that seems a good fit for that particular university and department, I think would be great. Usually in the instructor lines, you can get to senior instructor after about 5 years. So you can talk about how you would be looking to develop your teaching skills. Mm-hmm. How are you going to get better as a teacher? And the other thing we're not sort of talked about is that a lot of disciplines have faculty that are really focused on becoming good teachers and improving pedagogy in that area. At neuroscience, they have posters about pedagogy of neuroscience. They have talks on that. In psychology, there's journals that are related to the sort of pedagogy, the teaching of psychology. So if that's something you're really interested in, you better be connecting with that area. And maybe that's part of your big national conference, that you can be at least within an interest group there, meet those people, present at those sort of things. Be on that listserv that they have. Those are, if you want to become that real strong lecturer, those are the sort of things that you would be looking to develop over that time and be still a part of your field.
I got that question. It wasn't for a lecturer position; it was assistant position, and my answer was, well, I got interesting because I got the question same university, didn't get the job. But my answer was, when the chair asked me that question, I said, in 5 years I want to be assistant professor. So going back to what he was saying before, in 5 years I want to be assistant professor and working towards my professorship. That was my answer. Then, I don't know, the dean asked me the same question and said, well, in a few years I want to get your position. That was my answer. Maybe it was too strong, but that's what I answered at that moment. But I would align the answer to what he said. I mean, and how I answered at the first time. I want to be in 5 years assistant professor working towards my professorship. Because that also shows that you want to stay.
And you can also talk about the way that you want to become. You can say, this job is in a new geographical area, so in 5 years I see myself acclimated to that area, acclimated to the student body, and able to navigate the challenges that I will surely meet in my first couple of years a little bit more smoothly. And with that, I could hopefully, create curriculum or, be involved in the community in different ways, things like that.
I have a question from the online group. One question was asking, do you ever check students' comments on Rate My Professor to learn about candidates' teaching? I personally am afraid to look on Rate My Professor for how I am doing on my teaching. So
there's a lot of research. That I've done a lot of research about assessment and evaluations. I will never look at Rate My Professor. People write horrible, ridiculous things. Oh, yeah. We did, as far as I know, in the search that we did here, I don't think any of us did. And certainly it wouldn't, like if something was on Rate My Professor and it wasn't in their evals, we wouldn't be like, oh, well, it's in Rate My Professor, so it's true. It's like Yelp, like it's just, no.
Good news is that, at least if you go to Rate My Professors, the one that I have, that's bad. So since we know those are bad comments, why would I be checking somebody else? So I don't trust rate my professors. I know it's just, I guess it's a way for the students to vent. I guess certain students to vent, and that's the vehicle they use.
But even in like even when it's super positive and it's all fives, and the person's like, oh, they have a chili pepper or whatever, like that's not useful, helpful.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
But I have Googled people.
Yes.
So, you know, I think just to sort of see what's out there on that individual.
I was going to ask how much LinkedIn plays into your screening process.
We used academia.edu, but not LinkedIn.
I've not.
No, I have not used it.
I think
But
universities don't use LinkedIn.
But I can understand that some universities, some people use it, but in my field, I mean, here we don't.
To realize who's checking my LinkedIn, and they're all checking my LinkedIn. So.
Oh, they are? Okay.
Yeah, they check.
Yeah.
They did?
Yeah,
Okay.
I had,
could be
I
that they
had the same
Googled you.
experience.
Yeah.
I have my
People
LinkedIn
check
checking
you, they
before
can check
phone
my
calls.
LinkedIn. So.
I think that's going to be more like an engineering specific question. For teaching experience, how important industry experience is? Like
For teaching what, sorry?
for a teaching experience, how important is, like, if you have, let's say, if you have a lot of industry experience because you were working on your master's when you were going work full time, do schools actually consider that? Because again, you're applying for a teaching position. You don't really teach when you're in industry.
Particularly in my department, I had some industrial experience, 10 years of working for the industry, and they looked at that as really good. Because I was going to talk to the students about my experiences in the industry. So the answer is yes, it's a good thing to show.
I was on a chemistry faculty search position, and we hired a chemist that had been in industry 5 or 6 years.
Yes.
Usually at the end of the interview, they will ask us if we have any question. What type of question should we ask?
That is your place to show you have done research about that school.
Yeah.
So pull out something that, if they have a lecture series, or if they have a student group or a club, or they've recently had a conference or something like that, ask about it.
Definitely, if they ask you, do you have any question, you better ask something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because if you don't ask, it's because you did not do your homework. You're not interested on us.
And don't
So
ask the salary.
Don't. Yeah, don't ask.
No,
you don't. You know, that's coming. That's coming anyway. If you get the job, that conversation is gonna come. You don't need to ask for that question. If it is a public university, you don't need to ask. Just you should have to Google it. You'll know the people's salary. If it is a public university, it's out there. That information, you don't need to ask that question. It's out there. If it is a public university. If it is private, then it's harder. But if it is public, it's out there. You would know our salaries if you want to. Just Google it.
I would also say that you can ask the same question more than once. Not of the same individual, but to different people you're going to meet at that. So you want to get several different perspectives on exactly the same question.
Yes.
So when you're asking about, well, what are the expectations for tenure? I'm asking that each person, I want to, triangulate here and see, are these people all saying the same thing? Because I've been on interviews where the dean's saying this, and the department chair's saying this, and the chair's somebody else, the chair of the search committee's saying this. It matters. So be happy to ask the same. Don't feel you've got an answer from one person and that is the university answer and that's all you'll get. Ask the same question to several different people.
That's a good question to ask in that moment.
Just to piggyback with your question real quick, I asked the same question to a recruiter, somebody who has been a hiring manager for 15 years. And he says, the best answer for that, the best way to think about that question is that's when you interview me. So that's your time to actually get to know who I am. So if I was drilling you with questions, you have to drill me with questions.
I wouldn't be too aggressive though. I would ask 1 or 2 questions, and if it's a teaching related place, you might want to ask. It's true though, we forget though when we're on an interview, we're also making sure that we fit, right? And that we want to be there. But you can ask about what are the biggest challenges facing you as you try to teach such a diverse population? Go back to that question. What do you enjoy most about living in that area? Things like that.
Oh yeah, you could. I remember asking about the area. How is that area to live in, and so on and so forth. Because I don't know if you're married or not. In my case, I was married with 1 kid. I asked for schools, how the school system is around. That's another question I asked at that moment.
I have another question. If they ask us, how do you explain the qualification, your qualification for this job? How we should respond?
Did you get that question?
Yes.
Really? Because everything is in the package. That's an interesting question because everything you are is in the package. But you might want to repeat what you said in the cover letter, I would say. But I never got that question.
How do you?
Maybe somebody can read the package.
Actually, I guess similar thing. Yeah, they ask how you. The interviewer asked me that how you think you're a good fit for this position.
Oh yeah, that question. Yes, that's a different question. That's a different question. That question. I got that question.
Okay.
So that's why you gotta do your homework, right?
Yeah.
So you gotta know the student population, what kind of student you will be. That's a different question, you know. And yes, you have to address that. You gotta say, because at the end of the day, like he said in a couple of times, we when we're interviewing you, we want to know whether you're gonna stay with us. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be spending time talking to you if I know right up front that you're not gonna stay, because it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to get somebody, the right person or what we think is the right person. That's another thing, that we think is the right person.
And I think it's best in questions like that to sort of layer your answer so you cover all bases. So I'm a great fit because my qualification, like my specialty is in line with what the call is asking for.
Yep.
I'm also interested in teaching this kind of students and being involved in this kind of university structure. Like I think you can kind of hit all the bases, you know.
Any other question related to first interview? Okay, so we're moving to the campus interviews now.
Can I just say two more really superficial things? Get your pets out of the room and wear pants that are like matching your outfit. Don't wear like PJ pants or like whatever, because you may have to get up, and if you're on a Skype interview, that's
Okay. Okay.
The Skype interview, if you can find somebody else in another room, even in your house, do a practice run.
Check the lighting. Yeah.
We've actually done interviews over Adobe Connect where you couldn't see what the person looked like. And it was kind of like, this is kind of the age of, web type interviews. And we have all these online programs.
Yeah.
We gotta be able to figure out that you know how to make this work. So it's good to have a practice session before, like at least a day before, to make sure you can work out those games.
Lighting, camera angle, all of the clean your room, like.
I never had a Skype interview. Everything was fun. Everything was fun interview. But I always rehearsed. I was imagining questions. Okay, if they ask me this, I will answer this way. If I answer this, if they ask me that, and of course, like I was talking to them before we started, I did. Audio was my third interview. That was my third interview. The first interview, I know the mistakes I made. The second one, I know the mistake I made. So I was learning and learning. I got on the third, right? So it's always a learning experience. Always a learning experience.
You get the hang of it by the time you
Yes.
And oftentimes, I've experienced it myself that during the interview, even though I rehearse a lot, but during the interview, the first question I kind of blank out.
Happens.
And that's why having the questions. Can we have a paper like with bullet marks?
Yeah. And I think you can say, like, I just want to make sure I take notes so that they know that you're not. Because if they can't see that, then they might think, like, are you paying attention?
Okay. All right. So moving on to the campus interview now. So what kind of an experience do you think you had or students are going to have once they enter the campus, the next round, and especially if there is a demonstration of teaching involved?
So a couple of, I'll just start in with probably with the superficial. Comfortable shoes, those days are epically long. You're talking like 13 hours. You're meeting 100 people. If you are an introvert at all, get yourself into the most extroverted space you could possibly be in, take breaks in the bathroom to breathe, whatever you need to do. The committee will forget to sometimes. They're really good here, but at some places they forget to like give you a break, so it's like 9 hours and you haven't gone to the bathroom yet, and so you can intervene and be a human being. But prepare yourself. Wear comfortable clothes that are also presentable, things you feel comfortable in, so that you're not having wardrobe malfunctions. Comfortable shoes. The first interview I went on, I wore shoes that I wore all the time teaching that I thought were okay. That I ended up losing a toenail because they were I was so bruised by the end of the day. Because I think we walked 5 miles probably. It's a huge campus.
Some snacks.
What?
Some snacks.
Yeah.
You actually usually get pretty well fed.
Yes.
Yes, that's true. You do. I remember the interview I had at ODU. I don't know why I decided to travel. You traveled the day before, definitely, but I traveled in the evening, like 8 o'clock, something like that. I ended up in the hotel 1 in the morning, and the interview started at 8. Don't do it. I mean, it was successful. I got it, right? I'm here, but don't. I was so exhausted in the morning. Starting at 8 o'clock, I was already tired because of the travel. So, travel before. Addressing a little bit more about that, what my experience at ODU, I had to give 2 presentations. One as like addressing a class, but my audience was not a class, was the same committee, which was the weirdest thing ever. One thing that I did, and I learned that was a good thing. You gotta time yourself. You gotta practice that, and you gotta time yourself. If it is a teaching one, and they're telling you have 30 minutes, you better finish at 30 minutes, because that means that you're doing a good planning for your teaching. So you better address the 30 minutes as it is. You start saying this, next to that you're saying this other content and all that, and you end up kind of wrapping up at the 29th minute, something like that. It's good because that shows that you do some planning for your teaching. Shows that you do some work.
I learned as the search committee member that we will forgive a multitude of sins because we know that it's a long day, and we know that you're stressed out and that you're nervous, but you need to engage with the class.
Oh, yeah.
You can't be so practice as much as it takes to make you comfortable, because if you're standing there staring in the corner, which we literally had somebody do, almost turn their back to the class, that person is not suited. And it could have just been nervousness, but we can't say that person is going to be okay in the classroom. And again, the having your tech all set up, if your tech fails, what is your plan B?
Yeah.
Because you can't be derailed by that.
Mm-hmm.
Bring chalk and expo pens in case there's only one. What else? Just try to make it as smooth as possible, I think.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Russell.
So, yeah, and I think find out from the committee exactly what they're looking for in these presentations. I mean, is this a research presentation? Is it a teaching presentation? Is it both? What do they really want to know? They're trying to judge that. So at Penn State Berks, we would ask for a teaching presentation. So that was the focus, and you would come and you would actually do it in a class. And it was important to find out, what class are you teaching in? What have the students done so far this semester? What content have they already covered? What are they used to doing? You can ask those questions ahead of time because you want to come in and give this talk. But you want to show a range of teaching skills. So you want to be able to show that you can stand and lecture for a bit of time. One person I saw, they had all these activities planned, and the problem is there will be people on the committee that want to see you stand up there and be that sage on the stage. And so even they had some nice activities, there were aspects that other faculty wanted to see them. So you should be able to stand and talk about this subject, explain difficult concepts, engage the class, speak to them, get answers from them. And do activities. So if you're saying, I'm a great teacher and I have all these activities, then do some activities. But you do have to be careful, because I've seen people that were assigned a reading, and the students were told to read. And of course the students went, I'm reading for this job search candidate. Not a soul did it. And then that made it difficult. So make sure they're activities, but don't assume students have done a load of prep or something ahead of time. And that sort of fell down. But think about activities. You're going to put them in groups and have them work on things. And absolutely, this is an opportunity to show the kinds of teaching skills you have. But show a range of things, I think. Yeah.
For my interview here, I brought some demonstrations with me. I was talking about fluid mechanics, so I brought some fluid mechanics stuff and so on.
I'll get an point.
Yeah.
Well, we have a question from the online audience who wants to know, when you do these teaching presentations, who chooses the topic?
It depends on the school. So yes. I had for me, at some schools were like, here's what we're doing, and this is what we're doing on that day in the syllabus. It's an intro class. I should be able to do anything. And then other places, they want you to teach what you're most comfortable with. So pick something where you can integrate these activities and lecturing and all these different things. Yeah.
Yeah. In my case,
and if they don't tell you, then ask.
Yeah, okay. Definitely.
Yeah, you had a good
Any 2-day interview? Is it only one ever?
In my case, the only ones I had was on 1 day. But I heard that some other universities have 2 days.
Oh, I have to.
I've been on a 2-day and a 1 day.
I had a 3-day once. It was
2 days? Wow. Wow.
What?
They're already employing you.
Yeah, I know. It was tricky.
Wow, 3 days.
Because it was a remote campus. We had to go to the main campus, meet everyone at the main campus, then go to the remote campus, meet everyone.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So you said each interview takes 9 hours per day. What happens during the 9 hours? I mean, apart from the meetings and... Well,
it depends, but definitely there is a talk that you have to give. Could be teaching, research. That's why we suggest you to ask how it's going to be handled. That takes like an hour, 1 hour and a half, 2 hours maybe. Then you got to be interviewed again for the same committee. After that, you get interviewed by the department chair, and somebody from the college, could be the dean or any associate dean. You will get interviewed for some other professor in the same department, and that is half an hour. That add up. Then you gotta go for lunch with some of the faculty. So it goes really fast. You know, it goes really fast. You don't. The thing at the end of the day, you're exhausted. You're tired.
And sometimes you meet with students.
Yes.
Depending on if they have a student group, you might meet with a group of students, or you might meet, with selected students in a class. It just depends. But they also do like to sometimes solicit student input or see how you interact with students.
There is also a moment that they take you around campus to show you campus and all that. That also happens. They show you around.
You might tour the area. You might even meet with a realtor. And in fact, I've asked that at interviews before, if there's a period of time, so I can actually have a look at the area and see if I'm interested.
You should plan on breakfast, lunch, and dinner with the people there. Here I had breakfast with the chair, teaching demonstration, meeting with the dean, meeting with the individual faculty members for 15-minute slots, lunch with the department, meeting with the students, research presentation, meeting with some other administrators, and then dinner. So it's like the whole...
It's a whole day.
Whole thing.
I remember one interview that they asked me to stay for 2 days, but we didn't have dinner. So I took that opportunity to say, shouldn't we go for dinner? Because here's the thing. They are meeting you, but you are also meeting them. You want to make sure you're going to get along with those guys, with those anyone in the department. So it's a two-way street. So you want to get to know them well, relatively well. It's 9 hours. It's not like you're going to know their life in a few hours, but the more you meet, the better.
So you offered them dinner?
No. In that case, because I knew there was a mistake. No. In this case, I didn't offer the dinner. It's just because in that case, they at the very first email I got, they mentioned about a dinner, and that's why I scheduled the trip, my trip back the next day. Then all of a sudden the dinner was gone, and it's because when they send you always the day before, 2 days before, they send you the itinerary, so you know exactly who's you're gonna be meeting, for which you have to do your homework. By the way, if you're gonna meet the dean, check out what the dean does and what is so you know already who you're gonna be meeting. So all of a sudden I noticed that didn't have the dinner. I was ready for the dinner. No, I'm kidding. But the dinner wasn't there. So I said, hey, I know you scheduled a dinner before, so I wonder what happened to it, because I was ready to meet more people because of the reason I said before.
Have you guys had an experience where, based on your on-campus visit, that you're no longer interested in school?
Yep.
What was some of the factors that came?
Blatant racism on behalf of the search committee. Very obvious to me that there was a lot of drama in the department. So I would go to one person and they would vent about the person that I had just talked to. Horrible place to live. This is all one interview that I'm imagining. And the first night after the first dinner, I cried because I thought, if this is my only job I don't know what I'm going to do. And I did get offered that position and didn't take it.
And you're here.
And I'm here, thank God.
But I think sometimes we do get very focused on I need a job, not realizing that this is something that we like.
Exactly.
You're 5, 6, 7, 8
It's
years.
a big chunk of your life. Yeah.
Already go there, and I'm not going to knock Illinois, but I interviewed at Illinois, and I had a great job offer. But I just could not imagine dragging my husband and my child to the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically had to say, and so it was an easy decision. I was like, yeah, great job offer. I mean,
Yeah, you cannot forget that that's a place you're gonna spend time, and you have to engage with that community. You gotta talk. They'll be your coworkers. Those are the ones you're gonna see every day. You're gonna see them more than your wife, than your husband, and your kids. So remember that. Remember that's an important decision. That is an important decision.
And it's okay to have that. I think one of the reasons I cried about it was because I was like, oh no, I never expected this, because you're so geared up to be like, I'll move wherever. But it's okay to have things that are non-negotiable, and
definitely.
It's better to know what those are before you accept the job than when you get there.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned asking, the same question of different people. And I got offered a position at a Research One school, and there was just very wide differences in what they thought the job should be. I had the dean telling me he could provide me with money for equipment, and he had these high expectations. I thought that was great. And I had the chair of the department tell me there was no money for equipment.
Ooh,
and
something is odd.
Yeah, yes, and I also got left. I got called on like a Wednesday, offered the job. No deadline or anything. On Friday, they called. Actually, where my wife was living at the time, not me. They called the wrong phone. They left a message saying if I didn't respond that day, they would rescind the offer. I did not hear that until later. I never knew about that because I happened to call them that day. And I originally took the job. I said, yeah, because I was so excited. It was a Research One institute, graduate program, PhD students. I thought it was fantastic. And then I spoke to the department chair, said no equipment. I went back to the dean, and he said, oh, well, what do you need? So I put a list together, and the dean said, yep. And then I went, whoa, it's not a place I want to be. That these two people, the department chair could actually have fired me before I made it to tenure, because she would have been the main person reviewing me through the process. So I, at that point, decided we are not on the same page. And so, I think you can't just say, I've got to take this job no matter what. I think you are really assessing, is this going to be a good situation? And sometimes it's maybe better to stay a student another year, or take a postdoc, or do something and develop other things that you're ready for that assistant professor position or whatever in the future.
And at the end of the day, the right job is coming. Listen, if you got the phone interview, think about this. 200 people and you got the phone interview. We only call like 10. In my department, we only call like 8 out of 100. So you made a good cut just with the phone interview. And if you went to campus, imagine that. You're making another good cut. So don't think about being rejected. No, think about the other way. It's the other way, the way to see that you got the experience of getting a campus interview. that is great. It means that something good is coming.
But this is, I think, kind of after the fact, but I think you do, even up front, think about fit. Because I, for example, I interviewed at the #1 program in the country in my field. And it was, I thought I did a pretty good job, and I kind of was expecting the offer. But at the same time, the people that I met put so much pressure on how difficult it would be to get tenure.
Really?
And I was also going to have a baby. You know, I'm thinking, is this really what I want to envision the next 6 years of my life? I actually had in this interview, someone asked me, not the search committee, but another faculty member, he said, we only, and this was at Syracuse, we only want stars. What kind of star will you be in 5 years? What kind of star will you be in 10 years? I had just defended my dissertation. I did not think about being a star, and I think I made up a pretty good
You could have answered a bright one. A bright one.
Working on your first job, it's a lot of pressure to think about this first 10 year position. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not quite ready for that level of a position. So I'm up at ODU.
Yeah, you.
And the beach.
There you go. Nothing beats that, right?
Okay, you have a question.
Yeah, I have a question. I heard that some of the lecturer position or teaching position, they're not going to. I mean, after their usual Skype interview, they finalize the process and send you email if you're accepted or not. Or is it true, or they always have a campus visit?
I've heard of them skipping the Skype interview. I've never heard of them skipping the campus visit.
Me neither.
Which doesn't mean it doesn't
in
happen.
our department, lecturers go for phone interview and campus interview. The whole thing, just like assistant professor.
Teaching position.
Yeah.
One, okay, yeah.
Okay,
No, you go ahead.
How many numbers of candidates will be selected for the job? I mean, in common.
For the job, or usually it's
I mean, for one job, how many candidates will be selected?
To come to campus.
Yes,
Three.
Three.
It's the norm.
Is the norm, yeah. In what I've seen is just three. You could get 170, 120 in my department. I'm talking about my department. I don't know yours, guys. So 120, we screen that to 10, 8, 9 phone interviews, and then 3 out of those 9.
Most I've ever heard going on campus is 5, but I think that's fairly rare. 3, I think, is usually the
Yeah,
magic.
I also have heard 5, but the problem is that it's expensive. You gotta bring them over here. That's why you don't want to go to, unless the pool.
Yeah.
What's that?
Very time consuming.
It is very time consuming. Yes, it means that 5 days of your life are gone. Search community, 5 days of your life are gone. That's why you don't read enough.
You want
Can there be a situation that these 3 candidates come the same day, or they might be able to?
No.
That's physically impossible.
Not in this country, but in the UK, they actually bring them on, and you see the other candidates there.
Really?
So if they're in other countries,
So you could be walking along them?
you would see the other people.
Wow.
So it's but in the US, they usually keep candidates well. You know, there might be one flying out as one flies in,
exactly.
but they're
that's about
really trying not to have people be aware.
Yeah, that doesn't happen. I don't think.
In US.
In the US.
Yeah, exactly. I'm talking exactly.
So I have a question from an online participant who wants to know if you would share some of the mistakes that you made during the campus interview so they could avoid making those mistakes.
I had a really funny moment that I was interviewing at the CSU system, California State University, and they have a lot of they have a huge emphasis on the the faculty senate structure, and actually the department, I had been someone else had told me about this, so I studied up on it because I came from a school that basically didn't have that at all. And then the department themselves, things were going well, and I was about to meet with the dean, and they were like, okay, make sure you talk about what you think your role is going to be in faculty senate. And so I was so focused on that we got to the end of our half an hour, and she said, so tell me something about yourself. Nothing. I had nothing. And I just stared at her, and she said, so usually here someone tells me like an interest they have, or I have like a really weird life. I have lots of weird hobbies. I could not think of any of them. And so I think I was like, I like music. It was so don't forget you're like a human being, and that you're meeting human beings, and that a lot of the conversations, I made a lot of friends on these searches, even at jobs I didn't take or didn't get offered, because you're, it's a small world, whatever your field is, and so you're connecting with the people, and it's kind of fun, I think.
And I remember I was in the committee, and I remember one person we were interviewing, he couldn't pronounce a word. He just blocked. Mm-hmm. And we start saying, and it was just fun interview. And we just talking to relax. This is just think about that you're talking to your friends and all that, because he just blocked. He couldn't talk. After 5 minutes, he started talking. But we asked questions, he was mumbling. I mean, he couldn't make a coherent sentence. It happens. We did. We actually did. He left, but we actually did select him. He left after a few years. But yes, it happens, and it's true what you're saying. And we know we are interviewing human beings, so we know that could happen. So, as part of mistakes, there was one mistake that I really regret that I did, because I don't know why. I don't remember exactly how the conversation came about, but I was talking to the dean of this college, and we started talking about visa situation and all that. That's the type of conversation you don't want to address, I think. Because then it means that you were saying, like you were mentioning before, Ali, that maybe you're looking for the job just for the green card. So you gotta be careful with that. You have to be careful with that. I was looking for the job because I wanted the job, but happens to be that it came across like that. I think that's the reason I didn't get it. I think.
So when do you ask them about whether they'll be, processing your H1? Or
you don't need to. Maybe you don't need to ask, because everything is online. You just look into if when I applied to ODU, I was looking into the visa offices online, so I knew the process and all that. So I knew more or less the process. Of course, if you're getting, for those of you who are international, if you're getting an academic position, the university will help you out to get the paper. So don't ask that question, because that's coming. Because there is no reason why will I be hiring you if I know that you got to leave later on.
But wouldn't the department have to cut a budget for it?
That's true. Some department give some money. Sometimes the department is not the one. Sometimes it's the dean who gives the money. Sometimes you have to pay that. Sometimes you have to pay that, but being an international student, you got to be careful with that, because you don't want to come across like, I need this job for the paperwork. You don't want to come across like that. You want the job because you do want the job. And by the way, I also need that paperwork, but you wanna show them that you are there because of the job.
But you also want to be careful who you broach that conversation with.
Definitely.
Because the search committee, for example, we wouldn't know the answer, period.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think here at ODU, I think the department chairs are also kind of outside of that process.
Yes,
so it also is a challenge to figure out who would be the appropriate person that you would talk to if that was a really important issue to bring up during the campus interview. I've always been more of the opinion that generally they know that if they're bringing in an international candidate, that potentially is an issue.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, there are clear situations where, I've actually been asked when I was interviewing, because I was an international student when I was on the job, on the job market. But people who would look at my record wouldn't necessarily know that. And so in situations where there was confusion, I've actually had the search committee bring up an issue that was raised to them. But I myself was a little wary of bringing up kind of a visa issue.
Yeah, I was asked as well about those questions. What's your current situation, your legal situation, immigrant situation in the United States? And you gotta say that. I have an H1 or whatever you have, explain that. But like I said, if we are interviewing, if we give you a phone call, it's because, and we know you're international, we know that's gonna happen. We know that's going to happen. What you don't know is who pays what. But that the paperwork is coming. The paperwork is coming, no question about it. Now, the question is, who pays what? Is it you that you have paid the whole thing, or is it half and half, or is it 3/4 to 1/3? Whatever that, you don't know. But it's tricky to ask that question during the interview because you don't want to come across like, oh, I'm here because I need that paperwork.
You also don't want to come across as like, oh, I've got this in the bag, like that kind of.
Yeah,
which,
good point.
Even though that's completely not where the question's coming from, that can feel like arrogant.
Yeah. Is it possible that during this campus interview they ask you to, anything that they should know already about you, and then later you don't broach the subject, but then later on they might say that you never brought up this subject of visa processing or during. Is it a possibility or?
I don't know, because for example at ODU and a lot of other places, when you actually put in an application, there's a box that you actually have to check about legality to work in the country.
Yeah.
So I mean that information is already available to the search committee.
Okay.
Whether or not search committees care about that is is a separate story.
Yeah.
And so it's not in that sense your lack of disclosure, because that information has been made available when you put in your application. So I don't know that it would come back and say, well, you didn't tell us.
Okay.
And it's by no means like a weird thing to be asking at the negotiation stage when you get the offer.
When you get the offer, exactly.
But I do want to caution, because I have seen more recently, just in the last 2 years, ads that specifically say we will not hire.
Yeah.
Those without
green card or
legal authority
authorization.
to work in the country. So, I think they are being more explicit. If they don't have the resources, or they don't want to pay, or they don't want to do it.
Yeah. Definitely,
showing up in the ad.
exactly. If they don't have the resources, they will tell you, and then you don't apply, if you're international, of course. But if they don't say it, it's because they do have the resources. They've done it before. It's not a new thing for them. Again, the question boils down to who's paying that. That's all. But the process is coming.
So I have an online question about social media and how it might play a role in the application. So Danny, you said you Googled candidates, and Orlando, you have an e-portfolio. But to what extent is social media presence relevant to a search committee?
I'm certainly not going to be looking for people on Twitter or Facebook or anything like that. To me, the Google is, I have identified an applicant who'd lost their medical license, and so I informed the rest of the committee I was on. By the way, I found out this information. So there's been cases that have made the regular media that we've heard about where, there's been some ongoing thing with an individual that they then apply for a job and that nobody bothered to Google them and they got hired. So I think it's just a quick Google search. Is there anything, is this an axe murderer or somebody that we might want to... Penn State had hired a murderer at one point. So it's more a matter of just doing some due diligence to just... Is there information that's out there? But I'm certainly not trying to sneak and get into people's Facebook and things like that.
Yeah, me neither. I don't try. I do Google, but just for general things and so on and so forth. But I don't. However, I have heard that people go and read, so you gotta be careful what you put up there.
I would also be careful of what industry-specific social media stuff is out there, because there are blogs and things that you may have identified yourself as, and that you're posting under, and you might just want to be able to give an account of what that was about. Does that make sense? So when I interviewed here, I had just gotten a comment sort of taken out of context, and it had my name attached to it, and it was put on an industry blog that I knew that people were likely to look at, and so I just brought it up and said, here's a thing you might have found if you Googled me. If you didn't, I just want to explain it to you. So
you have a question?
I have a question. When they actually provide the offer, how many days you have to respond to that offer, and how open universities are to negotiations for salary and some other stuff?
Well, I thought I had more than 2 days, but at that one job, and they did not tell me a deadline. In that case, I think you can ask for a deadline. I think there's an expectation, though, that this should be something that you know, at least a week or something, maybe more. And then absolutely you can negotiate. This is the biggest time to negotiate. They have picked you, and this is the time to try and push on the salary. And the usual trick administrators do, I'll give you $1,000 more, is the standard line they all do. That's been my experience. But you absolutely want to push for more. Find out what other people are getting paid at that university, at that rank. Find that information out. Go back to them. Startup money or facilities, space, you want that. You want to negotiate. You want to get that in writing. I've heard of people not get things later on. If it's in writing, you simply go and show that, especially if administrators change. So the dean says, yeah, I'll give you all of this, and then the dean's not the dean anymore. Mm-hmm. If you've got that in writing, you know, universities are scared of lawsuits. So if there's something in writing that you can take to them. But I think you've got more opportunity to negotiate then than you ever have once you're in the job.
So what can be there in the writing? Like what kind of facilities can be, like conference money or
research funds?
Travel funds, facilities, equipment if you need equipment.
Graduate assistantships are important to ask for.
Very important. Those are the three I remember. Of course, the salary as well, but the salary, like Dana was mentioning, and like I mentioned before, this is out. If it is public university, it's out there. It's out there, you know. And by the way, talking about negotiating salary, the only moment you will ever have to negotiate salary will be that moment. Once you're in here, you don't have leverage. You don't have a way to negotiate more salary. So if you want to get a good salary, better be at the start. Because after that, you just get the increase, the regular increase everybody gets, especially in our university. There is many merit increase of salary, but that doesn't happen all of the year. But some other universities, they do take that into consideration. But the whole point is that the best moment to negotiate is that moment, at that moment. So you better take it.
And I would say, like, be as aware as you can of the limitations of the school, because
that's well.
So
you don't want to
in the humanities here, we have a, and this is like well known by the dean and everybody, a pretty low starting salary. So if you go in and you're like, I will not accept a job that's not $100,000 a year, like they're just going to be like, all right, bye, like, because there's no way they can, even if they had the funding and they could direct it to you, they can't hire you as a junior faculty making $30,000 more than the chair. So I think being aware of like what
that will create some conflicts anyway. Yeah. So you don't want to do
even
that.
If they could do that, yeah.
Even if they could, I mean, why is he? Because again, we will all know who earns what because it's available.
And I think is also to provide reasons for this.
Yes.
I want this, you know, this is a salary. I mean, I know at the moment you can't do that. Later when you have a job, you can use your current salary as a bit of a negotiation and the cost of living as a bit of a negotiation. But you can use things to sort of for that. But things like graduate assistantships, equipment, I need this to get going in my lab and get the research. So you've got to sort of say these are things that are going to, and what you can do with them. I will be able to use this for teaching as well as research. Places love that. You know, equipment that can do both.
And I got everything on writing through emails, and thanks God, because I have had the third chair right now. So it's like the second chair didn't know. Boom, this is the email where we agreed. We said yes, here it is. Because otherwise, it's not like they forget. It's just they don't know. They don't know. And then when there is a change of chair of department chair, I don't know why, but they don't necessarily talk. There is a change. You're gone. The next one is stepping in. That's it.
We are kind of. We have hardly one more question. Time for one more question. So once you are in job, what to expect in a teaching job, and how easy or difficult is it to transition from a teaching to research-based university? So, and that kind of will be our last question because we don't have time for it.
I want to say one more thing. Sorry about the on-campus. Make sure that at every transaction that you have, just be kind. you're being interviewed from the moment when they email you and tell you you're coming on campus, because we had a situation where we had a very tight competition between two people, and one of them was super rude to the admin and super rude to the lecturers. So
that makes a difference.
just, yeah.
That makes a
Simple
difference.
decision.
As simple.
They made
Yes.
it easy.
That made it easy. Exactly.
And then
what to expect in the
Yeah.
job, and how is it?
Well, I think a big part is asking, what are those duties? So as I've said, there's sort of 12 contact hours. My perspective, I've seen 12 contact hours of teaching a week is a full-time teaching-based position. Under those circumstances, it is really tough to keep research going. I've seen some people do it, but very few. Many people, their research just drops off. And then if your research drops off, 5 years, you've got one publication and you want to apply for Research 1, you are not competitive. It is, even if you had 20 publications before that, they're going to say, you're not doing research at the moment. And so if you really want a research position, I do think you want to be wary about, if you're going to take an instructor a heavy teaching load for a year or two, maybe that allows you to get some publications out, and maybe that's okay, but the longer you're in it, the harder it is going to get out of that.
What kind of responsibilities are there in the teaching role? Other than teaching, like what are the kind of responsibilities?
Well, here comes the common list: teaching, research, and surveys. And they all tell you, don't pay attention to survey, but you still have to do it. Because nobody gets the tenure because they excel in surveys, and it's true. It's true. We pay attention to teaching and research, and depending on that's why you have to ask that question: what's the load you expect me to dedicate to teaching? What's the load you expect me to do for research and surveys? You gotta ask that question. It's important to ask that question. Very important. Very important.
I also think hit the ground running as soon as you get there. Go to everything. Go to all the orientations.
Oh yes.
So that you know what you might have missed on the campus interview or what you did in research. And then I think the best advice I got in terms of making sure keeping your research alive in that first overwhelming year of transition, either to a tenure track job or back to a research position, is to tie up all the loose ends. Send out everything you have, every half-baked idea, bake it until it's done, so that you can front load the process.
See, one thing I just remember in the negotiation part, also the initial load. In some universities, they just don't give you classes in the first semester, or one class or two classes, and it gradually starts to increase. You gotta negotiate that as well. So it's salary, the initial teaching load, students, grad students, money to travel, and money for equipment. Those are the 5 things you gotta negotiate, and you gotta make up your mind right now. You're applying already, so you gotta know, and you're applying, and you know what you'll be doing later on, right? So you should start coming up with a number, because the question is coming. I don't know when, but it's coming. The negotiation is coming.
They're only sending out one offer at a time. Like if they have for you the job, you have the week to say yes. You're not going to get nicked or something, and then if you say no, the offer's still.
Yeah.
Yes.
You don't have to quickly or worry if you want more salary than the other person.
Oh no.
No, they've picked you, and just be kind and courteous back when you are asking for other things.
Definitely.
You don't put the demand. If I don't get this, then
No. That's a negotiation, not a demand.
Right.
You're negotiating, you gotta be kind.
Yeah, I think you're just asking for these things, and this is why it'll help me in my transition here and get going, and then it's up to them to say, oh, I can do this, I can't do that, I can meet you halfway here.
Exactly. And it's important what he has said it a couple of times already in the same subject. You gotta explain why you need that. It's not like I need this, period. You gotta explain why you need that.
And
So actually,
okay.
before we'll see how that goes. I do want to make sure people get access to these resources. So this bit.ly link will take you to the archive of all of our Career Pathways events. And so we've had previous academic job search workshops that are recorded and are available by going to this bit.ly link. So you should log in using your Midas, and all of the previous recordings of our PFF events and PFP events are all in that archive. So if you're still trying to get the PFF certificate and you're short a few events, you can use recorded events as well. Just putting it out there. We also have on the Career Pathways website a whole tab on career exploration and planning. And there's a whole series of questions about the academic job search, about kind of a Q&A with faculty across the university in terms of the campus visit, in terms of putting the cover letter together, in terms of looking for the right position. So go to the Career Pathways workshop if you do want more resources about the academic job search, and look under the Career Exploration and Planning tab, because a lot of the academic job search materials are already on the Career Pathways workshop listing on the site. But this, more than anything, I think if there are specific things that you're interested in finding out more about diversity and inclusion in the classroom, tips from faculty at previous events where we talked about the academic job search, this is definitely where you'll want to go to look at those recorded previous events. So I think we have one more question.
One quick question, yeah.
So you said when we got the offer, we are picked. And let's say they give us 2 days from a search committee perspective, and we didn't accept it. So what do you do again? You look, because three people came to campus, and you offered the email to one, let's say me, and then I rejected it or didn't accept it, and then what happens?
Well,
from a search committee
it's actually not
because you send email, them not accepting.
Well, another thing to understand with this process, the search committee is usually not making the decision. They are making a recommendation.
Right.
So it is usually, it might be the dean or the provost, depending on what rank this position is, and they're making the decision. The search committee will make a recommendation. The chair of the department will make a recommendation, and they'll just go to the They will look.
Emails that we didn't accept you guys.
No, they won't have said that.
No.
No. But you'll know the longer that the pause goes on, the longer your wait is probably they've offered the job somewhere else, and that if you then hear it might be that somebody turned it.
We don't send the email saying you didn't get it. We don't send that email. Once it's done, it's signed and all that, then we say we regret.
But sometimes we don't necessarily go all the way through and email all 3 people, because it could be that of the 3 people that came to campus, only one is a viable candidate. So it could be that you're the only person. But you can, if you're still on the market. So this happened to me. I was still on the market. I had on-campus interviews coming up when I got the offer. You can say that and ask for more time, and hopefully they'll
That happened to me as well, and I'm glad you're saying that, because I work on address that if they give you 2 days, that's also negotiable.
Right.
You could say,
I need a week.
5, I need a week. Yes. You could say that. You could say, hey, 2 days is too short. I gotta talk to my wife. I gotta talk to my kids.
Yes.
And then you're saying, no, 2 days is too short. I gotta think about the offer, and the negotiation is about to happen. So you could ask for more days.
And I've heard of them going over longer than that, where candidates have brought their spouse to the location, checked out the area, they've explored other jobs for the spouse and all of that, and then said no, or yes. But so it can be, all of that's a negotiation.
That at the moment they give you a call, start negotiating. But be polite. Please don't demand it. You've got to be reasonable, because at the end of the day, you're going to be dealing with that person anyway. If you get the job, he or she's going to be your boss.
So with that, I want to wrap up this discussion. Thank you to the panelists, and I still have so many questions to ask. Thanks to the audience as well. It was very good, discussion focused, and I hope that you got most of your questions answered, if not all. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks to you.